From Del Rio, Texas, home of Lake Amistad, your host, Rob Wade. This guy who dives. This episode of This Guy Who Dives recorded live Sunday, 16 April 2017, episode 172. Happy Mother's Day 2017. Well, welcome once again to another episode of This Guy Who Dives, and I am your host, Rob Wade, aka Scubadog, because I'll dive with anybody. Or just about anybody. We were not here last week because we had a bit of a catastrophic failure with our main computer here. So I was frantically working on recovering some things. You know, when you have a hard drive issue, you have a hard drive issue, and it's kind of tough to recover things that you need to recover. Luckily, I have everything that's critical backed up. But the trick was getting the machine into a condition where I could restore what I need to restore. And then that whole process took quite a bit of work, a lot of effort and time involved to reload things that I need. Pardon me while I make some adjustments to the volume that I can hear so it's more comfortable. And I am also watching the comment area to see if anybody's jumping in. Normally we have one of our good friends, Bobby Love, likes to jump in late to the show. So I'll be looking for her to comment. Oh, I'm late again, which she always does. Also checking the audio because I have had, as part of the recovery, I had some interesting issues with the with my soundboard, with my audio. There we go. Check the volumes, make sure it's actually coming. Yep, looks good. I've got the if you've been to our website, I have a video, or our YouTube page, I have a video of the studio, or at least a fairly recent iteration of the design studio. Of course, beyond what you can see here, you don't see the actual cameras that I'm using, and give you more details on the microphones that we use here. Ronan's deciding to clean my my furniture for me. And I have a Behringer Xenix X1222 USB board. I really like the board, except I noticed when I recovered my machine, I had some interesting audio artifacts that presented a challenge I was getting, and I can't tell yet if the problem was generated at the board or it was generated via one of the components in the computer. I was having a really, really bad hissing sound in the background, which nobody likes to listen to that when they're trying to hear a podcast, certainly, but I discovered it when I was trying to record some music. My wife and I were participating in the National Day of Prayer kickoff ceremony at Laughlin Air Force Base, and we were asked to sing a song as part of that opener. And so because I have the studio here, I can record, I can play all the tracks. I have a couple of keyboards and synthesizer modules, and then I'm using Sonar X2 Professional to do all the track recording. And so I was recording all the background music for it. So, and I finished all that, and then I went to actually mix that down to a CD to be played in the CD player at the ceremony, and I was just getting this horrible noise over it. So it really frustrated me because I couldn't tell what the problem actually, and I still really haven't solved it. I've just reduced its impact by some strategic adjustments to some hardware and as well as software. So ultimately, the event went well, and it was a good time was had by all. So anyway, happy Mother's Day to all of you mothers out there, as well as all of you who kind of act like mothers. You know, one of the things that in our church life, we recognize that that a number of women and men actually kind of play the role of extra parent for your friends. You know, we have some close friends of ours that we've kind of spoken into the lives of their children. So really, my wife is kind of like a second mother to them, and I'm kind of like a second dad to them, or a third or fourth or whatever. And that's been kind of true really with a lot of the youth that we've dealt with over the years, especially our closer friends. They can pretty much rely on us to be able to speak into them the very same things that they do. And an interesting phenomenon about that is sometimes kids will listen to Tara or I when they won't listen to their parents, even though we're saying the exact same thing. And when we say something parentally or as a mentor, it's like sometimes it's like they're hearing it for the first time. And, you know, when they come back and they happen to relay that information to their parents are like, you've not been listening to me all this time. I've been saying the same thing. So it's an interesting experience. So in a way, to the degree that you are actively involved in the lives of the kids of your friends, you're kind of also a parent too. So happy Mother's Day to all of you who are actually by birth or adoption mothers, and happy Mother's Day to those of you who are pure by extension of the close friendships that you have with friends who have kids. That you're a parent as well. So, all right, let's hit our first segment, which is normally movie review. Finally, the dry spell is over for at least for a little while for us. If you watched the first episode, you know that we had a very short list of movies we're looking forward to seeing this year, at least those that we were aware of in January, because just not a lot that was interesting, and we felt like we really were driven to see. And so Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 was released this weekend, and I got to say it was better than the first one. I'll give this movie a straight up 10. It was more exciting. It had a much more fun approach to it without being really offensive. There were people that had roles in this movie that you kind of didn't expect the kind of performance you were going to see, and it was well done. So I'm definitely looking forward to Volume 3, as well as the Guardians of the Galaxy are going to be involved in with the Avengers and the whole Infinity Wars thing, because they have the part of the issue is the Infinity Stones, which is a subplot, if you will. So I got one of the dogs trying to kick me. I've got only one dog in the chair right now, and even she is trying to kick me out of my own chair. So if you have not seen it, I highly recommend you go see it. It was an excellent movie. It was so much fun. It really was a roller coaster ride, and just great performances by everybody. I think most will agree, unless you're seriously a hardened guy, that Baby Groot pretty much stole the show. The whole opening sequence was... I was just laughing so hard. This is one of those movies that, if you're entertainable at all, you will find yourself laughing so many times during this movie that you miss a lot. And so you'll have to see it at least another time just to catch the things that you miss because you laughed over. You know, Tara and I are involved in community theater and live performance theater. One of the fun things about live theater is it's a little bit different each show. Lines can be delivered a little bit differently. Somebody may forget a line. A number of things can happen dynamically that change a show. So it's never really the same show any two times you see it. But one of the things, too, is that, especially if it's a comedy of some sort, which most of ours are either musical comedy or just regular comedy, when an audience reacts to something, you are you've got to kind of play it off a certain way. Depending on the line and the scene, you may have to kind of back up and repeat a line or stop before you say a line. And you kind of get, the more experience you get as an actor, you get to a point where you recognize generally where people are going to typically react to something in the show, either a physical comedy or lines that are said or looks that are made. And so you'll learn pretty quick how to gauge that. So you kind of know, all right, I'm going to anticipate a laugh here. So when I say this line, I'm going to pause for a beat, see if the audience reacts, and if not, I move on. If they do, then you have a chance to kind of, keeping in character, play it off until you have an opportunity to move on. If you want an example of that, look at any rerun of Carol Burnett's show. If you saw an episode, if you saw a scene, a skit that Tim Conway was in, he absolutely knew how to grab a scene and steal it. And the rest of the actors, Harvey Korman, Carol Burnett, Vicki Lawrence, they would have to they had to be ready for where he was going to go. And it was as much fun to watch their reaction to Tim Conway moving off script, and how they would react to it. Because, obviously there was a script that they had to follow, but Tim Conway always found a way to, either through physical comedy or through just going off into some rabbit trail with the dialogue, or that it would throw them off. At first you would see them sticking to character completely, but then eventually you would see them, if he went on, the audience is laughing, and finally they would break. But the skill of an actor is being able to anticipate the normal laugh lines and be able to head those off the pass and be ready to kind of pause the action till the audience dies down and you can move on. Movies, you can't do that. It's filmed to hit a certain rhythm, a certain tempo to the scene, and scene changes, and then how they're edited is also factored in there. And so you don't have that opportunity. So if you laugh over something, the action doesn't stop. It continues on. So that's what I'm saying. This is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 is one of those movies that you really, really are going to have to see more than once. I'm looking forward to being released on video, on Blu-ray, but it was just such an such an awesome show. So I give it a straight up 10. Looking. Oh, look, Bobby's in there. It's good to see you out there, Bobby. Glad to see your reaction. I'm not sure why I'm not seeing. Ooh, I just lost my web page here. Well, I'm seeing it on the big screen there. That's interesting. That's interesting how I lost it on my tablet. Of course, I'm using wireless on the tablet here, as opposed to. There we go. I'm hardwired onto the server over there, so I get the full speed of our new router. But while the wireless is very fast on this thing, it's only going. I've got it configured so that, and I'm getting really into the geeky stuff here. I've got it configured so that the preference for media is given to the hardwired part of the network, because I have a router here and I have a router in our living room where the Xbox is connected, where our satellite dish is connected, TV is connected. So if we're watching, let's say, Netflix or Hulu or something like that in the living room, it's going to get the full preference of the full bandwidth that we can push media through. Or if we're listening to music in the living room from our server, I want that to have priority. So wireless drops in priority. Again, totally geeky stuff, but I know Bobby's probably going wah 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 as she's watching this. All right, so so again, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, I gave it a straight up 10. It was better than even the first one, which I thought was excellent. And there's 5 extra scenes through the credits. Now, one is kind of like the quasi tag. 3 of them are kind of jokes. Well, I won't go into that. There were 3 of them were like jokes. 2 of them were actual giving you hints as to what's coming. So some pretty cool stuff coming down the pipe. All right, some tech news. Microsoft hosted their annual Build conference for developers, and so they revealed a bunch of stuff they're doing. Now, those of us who are in the insider program, so that we have early access to updated builds of Windows, both on the PC and tablet as well as the phones. We get access to some of the patches, obviously, to improve the performance and stability of the operating system, but also some of the new features that they're working on. And the last official update that came out was called the Creators Update. Now, sadly, there wasn't, I would argue, and many have argued, there really wasn't much creative added to the build as far as features. And in fact, nothing was added to the phone as far as the creative, what little creative aspects they added. So we're now already into the next, what they've been calling Redstone 3 as in their code word for it, Redstone 3. And the Microsoft revealed at Build, they're calling it the Fall Creators Update. I'm like, really? So this is no kidding. This is the real Creators Update, because we know we didn't really have some serious, creator stuff in the one we just officially released. So we're going to add real creator stuff in it, or no kidding. So, and what they revealed, their big thing was this story remix. Now, in the Photos app. In the Photos app, they've added this interesting feature set where basically it's just an overgrown slideshow video creator. Okay? If you've got any kind of video editing program, the typical free ones that come with machines, I use Nero. I use the Platinum version because it's got a lot of other features in it that I really like. And so I use it for all my video editing, so because it has full timeline control, and I'm usually, as you see, all the videos that you see that we show on the show, that we present on the show, that I produce are produced through Nero Video. But you can do, and I've used this before, you can just plug in. Bobby just popped up a message. Nice. Oh, cool. You can just plug in a bunch of pictures and have it go through those and does little animations with it, where it zooms them in and out and slides around. You can add music to it. Well, what they've added to the Photos app is something that does that. Now, it also has an excuse me, got a frog in the throat. Truly, I did not eat frogs today. They have this album feature that it tries to go out there and look at your pictures and figure if you took a bunch of pictures at the same time, it's probably an album. Thing is, for me, it never gets that right. So I wish I could turn that feature off. It's not really that creative because it never gets it right. For those of you who are more, I guess, predictable in your picture taking, it might be helpful. So anyway, it kind of uses that and a little bit of AI to try to guess what a video montage of your slides should be. And so it'll give you some suggestions, and then you can go from there. You can add some things that just kind of animate the way a picture moves, and and it by default puts some music on there. They have a modest selection of music, generic music you can put, elevator music you can put underneath it. So if you don't want to do really any work yourself, it's a feature that I guess is okay. But if you are creative at all, this is such an underpowered thing. Now, one of the things they advertised about it and build was some features that aren't in it yet, as far as how they've released it. Quit kicking me. How they've released it as part of the Photos app right now for insiders. Supposedly, what they're going to be adding to it is ability to add mixed reality. So they showed how you can take like the Paint 3D program and put like their example. You can look it up on YouTube. Example of an animated dinosaur superimposed into a video of somebody running around. So you basically can kind of create your own mixed reality movie, which again, I don't see the value of for most people. They're not going to want to go through that kind of work. And anybody who does is probably going to be some kid who's like, oh, cool, look what I'm going to do. And what I've seen typically when somebody has a program that has a bunch of features like that, you'll see the uninitiated just throw the kitchen sink in there. And so it's just a chaotic mess that's not all that entertaining unless you pretend to be entertained. But so I don't see that it's, I think they're trying to hit a market that is better served by specific programs that do that well. Adobe Premiere, a number of your actual editing programs that do this where you can actually control timeline and put layers in and stuff like that. So, but that seems to be the only big thing they were talking about as being part of this fall creators update. So I think to me, it was really a non-event, as adding features that just get in my way as far as photos. When I look at my photos, I want to look at specific photos. I already have them curated. When we download photos from when we access them through OneDrive and stuff, they're saved in specific folders categorized on our server. So for instance, if you want to look at pictures from the musical She Loves Me that the Upstagers put on, we have a folder under pictures that's Upstagers. And then under Upstagers, we have folders for each of the shows that we've done. And so all the pictures are there. And I even go so far as having within those folders, here's rehearsals and set building, and then here's performances. So if you only want to look at the actual performance pictures, it's easy to access. And all of this is accessible via the OneDrive. So, and what's funny is where I have them organized specifically the way they need to be organized, the photo album creation capability gets it wrong almost every time. So, interesting. Let's see. Other tech news. Speaking of photography, anybody who's looked at videos I've shown, I love to take a lot of video underwater. I'm not as big on underwater photography because basically I'm just not that good at it. I just don't have the opportunity to get good shots. It's hard to take decent photographs underwater in the lake because visibility is always a challenge. Particulates are in the water. Even with dual lighting, creating a cross section or hitting from two different directions, I still get so much mess on the picture. It's hard to get a decent picture, but video tends to look better. It's more forgiving because it's in motion. I don't always get it right, but I've gotten better over time. And so we have a couple of cameras, but our mainstay right now is the Sea Life DC 1400 Pro Duo, which has the strobe and has the video light. That's what I'm looking for, video light. But they just came out with. I'm going to see if I can bring this up here. I was doing some editing here. we go. I was looking online, and they had just released the DC 2000 Pro Duo. So I'm going to throw that up there. Yeah. All right. Let's see if I can. Whoa. That's interesting. We're testing out a new version of the program. Yes. And this is version 3 public test, and it's got some changes in how things work that are kind of still throwing me for a loop. I'm so used to the old program that I'm still trying to get my head around some of these things. So, all right, so here's the DC 2000 Pro Duo. Now, we really love the results we get with the 1400. The only downside of it is, and here comes one of the other dogs. Up here. The 1400 is it's HD, but it's 720p video, whereas they've done a number of bits of improving. So this one is 20 megapixels. I think the one I have is 16. Yeah, 16 megapixels. So you got a bigger sensor on this thing, and it does a 1.8 f-stop, which is pretty awesome. For those of you who are camera buffs, will understand what that means. And of course, it is full 1080p video, which is excellent. And just like the 1400, it is rated at 200 feet depth rating, which, of course, unless you're a tech diver, if you're a recreational diver, you're only going to go as far as 130 to 140 feet emergency. So only tech divers would need something that goes down to 200 feet. And then if you're probably a tech diver rated to go that deep, you probably go deeper, and you probably need something with a better housing. So there we go. So if you buy the camera itself, it is $700, $699. Always round it up because it's really just $700. I just think it's funny when somebody says it's $199. Just say it's $200. But there's something that makes people feel better about having the first digit one lower than it actually will turn out to be. And but if you get the whole package, which I would suggest, the cool thing about the Sea Life cameras is it has a built-in filter to it. So digitally you can set it to where it's applies a red filter that is dependent upon what depth you're at. So for instance, if you tell it you're in the basic setup, if you tell it I'm not using lights, then it asks you, okay, are you doing this using it above ground, above the water, or underwater? If you're using underwater, then you tell it, are you basically snorkeling, so it's 25 feet or shallower, or are you actually diving, so it's deeper than 25 feet? So depending on which of those you choose, it will put a light red filter if it's shallow, or a heavier red filter when it's deeper, so it helps compensate for the loss of the red spectrum as you go diving, which is really cool. So you don't have to add an actual external filter. Most of a lot of your early cameras, and still even the GoPro, I think, has this ability. You can buy this additional piece too. Earlier cameras, you actually had to clip on an external filter. It snapped over or flipped over the lens to filter the red spectrum back in. Whereas the DC 1400 and the DC 2000 have it digitally built in. So you just choose that and it filters it for you, which actually looks great. Okay, so if you're not going to use the camera that way and you actually want the more vibrant colors, because anytime you filter, you're gonna lose some detail, even though it does still look really good. Then you want to add light. So that's how you get your spectrum back. You add light at the depth that you are. And so that's why you would have a strobe for pictures and the video light for video. But I have found that you can use the video light just fine. The video light that came with the DC 1400 Pro Duo had two settings in it, a full bright and a half bright. So depending on what you needed, you could set the level of brightness. It was just simply a pushing of the button to set the brightness that you needed. And then using the video light, then you could just take your picture that way. And I actually got some decent results from that. So I really don't need the strobe, but I can see that there would be some benefits from those for those who are more knowledgeable about video, about photography, underwater photography with strobe. So if you want to get the whole package, that will cost you $1,400 or $1,399. So you could probably get away. Well, no, probably you could get away with just getting the camera, the tray that holds the light pedestals on it, and the video light. I would guess that's probably close, right at about $1,000. That's probably $999 just for the video light and the camera. So I think this is definitely a worthwhile package. If you're looking to get a decent, powerful camera without going totally nuts. Now, you can get a lot of like Ike makes some serious cases, some underwater cases for your average cameras. But those things are like, you can spend more on an enclosure for your regular DSLR camera. You can spend more on the enclosure than you did on your camera, which is pretty crazy. So it really comes down to what you want to do with it. Personally, I think the very fact that this has settings that are specifically designed for people who use it underwater, that very fact alone makes it worth, to me, getting the Sea Life camera above all else, rather than holding it out for an enclosure for your camera. I would definitely suggest going that route if you can afford it. I mean, really, you think about it, $700 for that kind of a camera that already has its own enclosure, well worth it. 20 megapixel and full 1080p video. Pretty awesome. All right, so in other news, we have the PADI Women's Dive Day. They've been doing this now for, I think, 4 years. Or this will be the fourth year, I think. 15 July 2017. So, and they use this as a mechanism, I'm sure, to make money, but they're trying to encourage more growth in the dive community where women are concerned. You know, they really do. There are a lot of great underwater photographers and naturalists and environmentalists in the dive community who are women. But that sector of the dive community is growing, but it's still behind the guys. So if you are a female diver and you want to share in the efforts to expand the dive community amongst women, go to PADI's website and you'll see that they have a number of connections to various locations where they have events sponsored. So that is PADI's Women's Dive Day, 15 July 2017. Or you can look on Twitter, just look for hashtag PADI Women, PADIWOMEN. Let's see. Lake Amistad, I went out there this weekend. I was hoping to get a dive in, but man, it was kind of windy this weekend, and the visibility was just horrible. I've got some pictures I want to show to you. But the big thing for me right now is I'm just watching the lake level drop. If you saw pictures our last episode of how low it is, that was 2 weeks ago. It's dropped even more. Let's see if I can pull up the picture. Here we go. So for those who are familiar with Amistad Lake, this is the old 277 bridge. As you can see, it is now exposed. A number of sections, of course, have broken out of it. It's disintegrated. But whereas the last time we saw it, just the two end sections were exposed, and they kind of had it chained off because where you see the lighter dirt, etc., where the water or where the I can't really use a pointer to show you. See where the road looks like it ends, and there's just rocks and stuff like that, where it's just that lighter dirt. That's where the level normally is at. And so usually you get to use this as a ramp for letting boats in. I mean, people have used it for boat ramp, even though it really isn't one, but you can use it for one. It's a steep enough incline that your boats are pretty much okay, unless it's a really, really deep hole, deep V hole type. But now you can see the lake has dropped even more, and it's even more exposed. Let's see if I can change the picture. Hello. Work with me here. I have filed a complaint with the, well, not complaint, a bug report. Whoa, this is interesting. Oh, I hope this hasn't locked up the computer. Well, maybe it's not going to let me do it. Rotate? No. I do not know what this is doing. No, this is just like gone nuts. See if I can make it go away. No. Yeah, I filed a complaint with the programmers here to explain to them that that they have an issue with their slideshow program. The problem is clearly that it can't determine properly the orientation of the picture. So I told them that they need to either have it to where it doesn't alter your picture at all, or it lets you set the orientation, landscape or portrait, picture by picture. The previous version didn't have this issue. However you saved it on your hard drive, it pulls it up that way. So some pictures make sense portrait, some pictures make sense as landscape. So here's an example of landscape. Now, this, for those who are familiar with Lake Amistad, this is Rough Canyon. So this is basically up the Devil's River arm off of Lake Amistad. Now, the area you see here, this flat area, center left, this was all underwater. If you look even further to the left, you see that rock wall there that disappears off the left of the picture. The water actually was almost all the way up to the top of the rocks there. And I actually taught or assisted an instructor teaching classes out here. This made for a decent area to teach because it was fairly, as you see, it was fairly flat depth. So you couldn't get into too much trouble with this. Here we go. Here's another view of it. This is the gravel bank that we would set everything up. Matter of fact, you see this little concrete slab, or what's left of one. This was where the tree coming straight out from that rock was. That was the water. And so this made for a nice little gravel area for you to set up where you didn't dirty up your gear too badly. And again, here, this was all underwater. It's just so weird to see no water here. Okay, and so this is a shot at Governor's Landing. I used to teach the rescue diver class out here because, as you can see, there's that gravel area. That was, the water came up to that. And so it made a nice little quasi beach area for practicing, exiting a distressed diver onto the beach and performing emergency first response, CPR, etc. to him. But now you see that the water is so low that quite a number of the pylons supporting the Highway 90 bridge are fully exposed now. I mean, this is just it breaks my heart to see it. This was all of where I'm standing here to take this picture was underwater at one point. So you can see the lake level has dropped considerably. And then you can see how bad the visibility is. I mean, it's maybe 5 feet. Actually, it's worse closer to shore, but some of the areas I overlooked, it was maybe 5 feet. So while I typically will dive in anything, because the water's still so cold, we just haven't had any really hot days. I'm not inclined to go in and freeze, 65 degree water, 62 at depth. I'm not inclined to do that for 5 to 0 visibility. I would go to Sample Bay Creek before that. And again, because the wind has been pretty heavy for the last few days, and we had a pretty good storm. The visibility has just really gone down the old tubes, as they say. So that's what's going on out the lake. But I did talk to a little birdie with the Park Service, and because one of my favorite spots, shore dives to do, has been in the last few years, has been out at Spur 454. Now, year before last, as the lake came back up, they closed it back off because water started. There's a low point in the road at the farthest end of Spur 454 that the water had started to cross cover. Matter of fact, I had a video of me taking the dive trailer across the last weekend before they closed it, and so you see me actually driving through the water, and. But the lake is now low enough that it could be opened up. And so I posed the question to my friend at the Park Service, and he said, they're discussing it right now. There's some things that they have to do, because if you saw the picture, there's some things they have to do to clean it up. Because if you saw a picture that I showed a few episodes back, there's been a lot of overgrowth in the 2 years that nobody's been able to dive there or drive out there. So they said they're going to have to do some cleanup up there. So I'm hoping that they're going to do that fairly soon, because I would love to go back to teaching my classes out there, because it's so easy. I like the area. It's a nice cliff area to jump off of safely if you're one of those that likes to do that, because the cliff area it curves underneath instead of outward like it does at Scuba Cove. Diablo East cliffs, it's all stair-stepped out. And so you actually can kill yourself, and people have, jumping off the cliffs there. Whereas having been diving at the cliffs there by Spur 54, you got clear shot. It's at least straight. If not straight, it cuts underneath. So it actually is a safe area to jump off of. And it's a fun area to dive as far as I'm concerned. And then the cove right by the cliffs there, very easy to access. So I'm hoping that they're going to open that up. So more to come on that. As soon as I get more news, I will pass that on to you. Let's see. Oh, yes. I caught wind of a movie that I'm going to have to see. I'll probably watch it tonight. It's available on Netflix, and it's a documentary based on a true story, and it's actually got some actual video from it. It's called Dive into the Unknown, and I've got a trailer for it that I will share with you. Here we go. The video is spectacular. Now, we'll warn you, there's got some language in it not suitable for families.
Norjan-reissu lähdettiin oikeastaan sillä ajatuksella, että meidän oli tarkoitus mennä kuvaamaan se reitti läpi, se syvä osuus, koska sitä ei ole kuvattu koskaan aikaisemmin.
On sulla 2 happea, mutta se on kotimatkaa varten. No jos tulee joku hätä.
Ihan hyvillä fiiliksillä oltiin lähdössä liikenteeseen. Siitä sitten tuli sellainen ongelmien vyöry, että tuli semmoinen vaan mieleen, että ne jää kaikki sinne nyt.
Kaksi suomalaismiestä on kuollut sukellusonnettomuudessa Pohjois-Norjassa.
We couldn't even access that part of the cave. This really is just too dangerous. It's not worth to risk your own lives.
Me koetaan, että se on meidän homma mennä hakemaan pojat kotiin.
Eihän meille ole jätetty muuta vaihtoehtoa.
Ei haluaisi enää kokea mitään vastaavaa.
Se oli taas sellainen tylsällä kirveellä olisi ottanut kättä irti.
Tuli semmoinen hetki, että tiedät, että tämä menee aivan vituiksi koko homma.
Jos itselle sattuu jotain, niin miten perheelle käy?
Ei me vaan voida jättää niitä jätkiä sinne luolaan.
So I am going to check that out. I started watching little bits of it. This is trying to. I started watching little bits of it just to see what kind of underwater videography they were getting, and as you see, it's spectacular. I'm looking forward to seeing it on our big screen. And I have somebody trying to call me while I'm doing the show. Interesting. So, just the idea that you have some guys who they do this kind of thing for a living. They go to these sites. They're cave divers. Now, the scary thing about this is they're diving in caves in this frigid water. They're using dry suits. Not my thing. But then you have a tragic situation where a couple of people die, and that it's so dangerous that rescue attempts are called off by those who can make that call. And then you decide you're going to get a team together to actually go do it yourself. As a diver, I'm sure there's going to be breathtaking and scary. I'm looking forward to it. Again, as you saw, and I warned you, it's not suitable for the language, even though it's all in subtitles, because it's Finnish. It's the people doing this show or that experience this are Finnish, and so it's all subtitled. But just breathtaking views, the danger of cave diving. As you can see, it can be tremendous. If you are interested in just seeing more about that kind of thing, a good movie that also quasi-dramatizes some tragedy, but has some great videography in it is Sanctum. Again, that was a spectacular movie. We went to see that 3D in Eagle Pass, and it was amazing. I mean, in 3D, you just feel like you're there, and I was like, oh, I almost wanted to put on scuba gear because it was that impressive. So pretty cool stuff. So I'm looking to check that out. All right. Man, time flies when you're having fun. All right. So wanted to share with you some things as we're going into the new dive season, some things you should consider if you get connected with a new dive buddy. So, you know, the fact is, depending on whether or not you travel with your own dive buddy, you're going to have an opportunity often to, as part of a dive group where you just travel somewhere and then you're on a boat with a bunch of people. Or you may have your dive buddy develop some issues, some ear issues or other issues that prohibit a dive. And so you have a choice to make. Do you not dive because they couldn't, or do you go ahead and dive and you dive with a new dive buddy? So here's some things that you should, some discussion points you need to consider in diving with somebody new. One of the questions you want to ask is, how many dives have you made? That will give you at least a general idea how balanced they are with you. If you are a significantly experienced diver and they are not, then you may find yourself in a situation where you're kind of more of a dive master to them. You're watching them more closely, and so it could negatively impact the fun that you have on your dive if you're constantly looking after somebody who's tremendously less experienced than you. Okay. Another question you should ask, and you should both be sharing this information. How often do you dive? You may have had a lot of dives under your belt, but then have not been diving for a long time. So you want to get an idea if the person that you're about to be buddied with dives on a frequent basis. The more often a person dives, it's more likely that their skills are pretty tight, or not. And the reason I say or not, it depends on another question that we have coming up. Generally, I tell my students, when you're diving, try to make a point of specifically practicing skills that you learned in the class that you may not get a regular regular opportunity to use. Especially if it's a skill that you have a little bit more of aversion to. The most common one, mask clearing underwater. You know, the bottom line is that tends to be a challenge for a lot of divers, but you're not going to get better at it or more comfortable with it unless you keep doing it. So the more dives you have, the more opportunities they're going to have to actually practice those skills. Now, related to this is asking the question, when was your last dive? If they say, oh, I typically dive 8 times a year, you can ask them, when was your last dive? Now, if they dive frequently, but the last time they dove was last year, I'm going to be a little bit less concerned, especially if they typically are from an area where diving typically is only going to happen for them during the summer months, or they go on a number of trips. So if somebody says, it's been a year since I dove, but every year when I do dive, I dive a lot. And that's kind of my case. Outside of the classes, which give me tons of dives, outside of when I'm teaching a class, I'll typically dive, do a couple of dives a weekend, every other weekend, or at least a weekend a month. So I get a ton of dives in. And then I try to do one, sporadically through the months during the winter season. So it's usually going to be fairly recent for my dive. But even if I didn't dive at all during the winter, I have so many dives that I do during the in season to dive. That time off is negligible. Another question that you might ask is, what type of diving do you do? This will also give you an idea of the kind of experience. If you're going to be diving on a wreck, and even if it's external, and they've all been, just diving coral or just dove freshwater. This is going to be a new experience for them, and there are some potential dangers that they might draw you into. Somebody who's never been diving on a wreck before might be enticed to enter a wreck and put you in a bad situation, because inexperienced divers make some stupid calls sometimes. And so you want to know what kind of diving they've done. If they've done quite a variety of diving, I've done, if they tell you, yeah, I've done some night diving, I've been diving on some wrecks, I've been diving inside of wrecks that were specifically cut open to allow non-penetration divers, non-certified penetration divers to go through. If they tell you I've been diving in current and I've done deep diving, then you can be fairly confident that you're going to have a dive buddy who's going to be safe and attentive to what's going on. But then if all the diving they've been doing is with large groups, then, you know, quite often, and I'll be honest in saying this, when you go diving with a group that's, you go to Cozumel or whatever, you're normally with a bunch of people. The herd is your dive buddy. Okay. And so you have a dive master that's giving you the dive briefing. You go on the dive, you go as a group, they say stay as a group, and you all kind of hang together. And so anybody who gets into trouble, somebody's right there if you stick together. But there's really not much of a dive plan other than whatever the dive master tells you, and you just stick together. Whereas if you're actually diving with a buddy, you need to talk about the dive plan. You need to actually discuss how you're going to do this. What are your goals as part of your dive? If one of you has a camera and the other doesn't, there needs to be a discussion about how you're going to handle that. Because I'll be honest with you, more often than not, I run into divers who, if they're running a camera, which I usually am, they tend to be slower divers and not want to move along the reef or the wreck very fast, because we want to take an opportunity to look for and take video or pictures of something that may be so small that if you're just moving along, you're never going to notice it. You know, brine shrimp, there are so many tiny little seahorses. They're so small, you have to be going slow to catch them and actually get pictures of them. And then so typically your non-photography based divers are going to want to cruise right along and see as much as they can very fast. So having that discussion about what your goals are in the dive is going to be important. All right. And then ask, is there anything that I need to know about your gear? If they have a unique setup, if they have, let's say they're running an integrated second that's actually part of their power inflator and dump for an oral inflation for their BC, then you'll have to know that they're going to switch to that if you have to use, if you have to breathe air off of their system. They're not going to be able to hand you their second because it's on a short tether. It's right there by them. So you'll have to be aware that they're going to have to switch to that one and hand you their primary if you're going to breathe off of it. If you need to know if there's something unique about their weight system, there are some pretty interesting different weight systems, integrated weight systems that are starting to show up out there. Some of them are easier to work with than others, I have to say. And then also, is there anything that I need to know about your diving? For instance, one that could very easily be part of the equation is equalization challenges. A good friend of ours, Trisha, has she's a dive master. She's certified as a dive master. But one of her things is she's slow to equalize. So you have to wait for her to get through down the water column because it will take her a while. She's able to get to the depth. It just takes her a long time to get there because she equalizes so slowly. And so knowing that ahead of time will help you avoid frustration. Also, being aware if they of something like my situation, I wear contacts when I dive. So while I've never really had any problems, I had one incident, but it was not catastrophic. Diving with contacts can be a challenge if you're not prepared for that, or if something drastic happens, you get your mask kicked off or something like that. There's no way I'm opening my eyes underwater because I wear contacts. So I'm going to share that, and I share that with my students. I tell them, hey, I wear contacts while I'm diving. Is there anybody here that is going to be wearing contacts while you're diving? Or do you have, are you wearing a mask that happens to have corrective lens inserts in them? That could make a difference. If they lose their mask, you're not going to be able to just hand them another mask and it be okay because they can't see. So these are just some of the questions that you should have as part of your discussion with somebody who's a new dive buddy for you, that will help you make sure you're paired up with the right person, or helps you mitigate some potential problems or challenges or offsets that arise from the difference between your experience and equipment and their experience and equipment. So some important things to consider in your diving experience. All right. Real quick, a recap of the diving conditions out of Lake Amistad. The water still hasn't really warmed up at all, so 65-ish at the surface, 62 at depth. Visibility is just horrible right now. Like I said, it's about 5 feet. I'm hoping that we're going to get some hot weather here soon, consistently enough to start warming it up. And I'm hoping that I'll hear word that Spur 454 is opened up. And I will post that on our Facebook page if I hear words to that. And certainly I'll be out there diving in short order if I get that word. All right, let's hit a little bit of Ministrivia before we head out. Next Dive Club meeting, 18 May at Rudy's. Hope to see you there. Get connected with those of us who are more hardcore divers. Dive classes for this year. Running out of time to sign up for the May 25th through the 28th class. Then the next one is June 22nd through the 25th, July 27th through the 30th, August 24th through the 27th, September 28th through October 1st. Those are basic classes. I will entertain a advanced course or other if I have sufficient interest. So just contact me if you're interested in getting an advanced or higher class. If you want to sign up for these basic classes, I would like for you to sign up no later than the first week of the month of the class. If you are taking if you're doing the online academics portion from PADI, they charge a separate fee for that. If you're taking that class from them, then you can sign up later because I don't have to worry about taking you through getting your materials to get you through the academic portion. And I can just concentrate on the practicals in water, the pool and the lake, as well as your watermanship skills that you have to execute. That's the distance swim and the tread water. So let me know if you want to sign up for those classes. Check out our Facebook page as well as our website, delriodiveclub.com, and Facebook Del Rio Dive Club. Got Ronan whining about something here. I'll be directing the next musical for the Upstagers, so auditions for Dirty Rotten Scoundrels are June 4th and 5th. June 4th is a Sunday afternoon. Typically we meet at 1 o'clock for that, and then the 5th will be Monday. We meet typically at 7 o'clock, and both of those will be at the Firehouse in Del Rio, Texas. So if you're interested in that musical, you can go on YouTube and check out some theater groups that have done the show. It is a musical based on the movie made famous by Michael Caine and Steve Martin. Funny show. So, and we always do a plug for A Pet's Wish. They've had a number of adoption events and have had some of the dogs and cats that they have acquired adopted out, but they still need more help. I tell you, the requirements for feeding and medicine and just general veterinary bills are just so high to take care of all these abused, neglected, and abandoned animals. So please consider helping out if you're in the area, or donating money and supplies to help them out. You can just check them out on Facebook, look for A Pet's Wish, or look them up on the internets. And of course, if you would like to contact me, you can send me email to robert.wade@cetifox.net, or you can follow me on Twitter. Just look for Robert CFP, and I'll be happy to follow you back if you want to follow me on Twitter. That is all that we have this week. I think next week is the opening for the next Alien movie, Alien Covenant. So hopefully we will be able to give you a review of that movie. I'm looking forward to that, kind of starting to bring things back around full circle. So if nothing else happens to get in our way, we will see you next week on another episode of This Guy Who Dives. We'll see ya.